A 19-year-old kid walks into a bank wearing a suit that doesn't quite fit, flashes a confident smile, and walks out with tens of thousands of dollars that don't belong to him. No gun, no threat, no violence, just confidence, paper, and the audacity of youth. By the time he was old enough to legally rent a car, he had scammed airlines, hospitals, banks, and some of the most powerful institutions in America. By the time the billionaires and executives realized what was happening, the money was already gone. This is the story of how a teenager turned pretending into a profession, fooled everyone who was supposed to know better, and became one of the most successful con artists in history. Frank Abagnale Jr. wasn't born into crime. He wasn't raised in some dark alley or trained by master thieves. He was just a kid from New York who watched his parents' marriage fall apart. And that mattered more than anyone realized. Frank adored his father. His dad ran a small business, wore suits, spoke confidently, and carried himself like a man who understood the world. When his parents divorced, something snapped. The family stability vanished. Money became tight. Authority stopped feeling permanent. And Frank learned something early. Adults don't always know what they're doing. They just act like they do. At 16, Frank ran away from home with a few dollars in his pocket and an idea forming in his head. He didn't want to steal by force. He wanted to be accepted, trusted, welcomed. So he tried something simple. He wrote himself a check, and the bank accepted it. That was the moment everything changed. Not because of the money, but because of what it proved. If you look confident enough, speak clearly enough, and dress the part, people stop asking questions. Frank realized that the world ran on assumptions, and he decided to exploit every single one of them. At first, his scams were small. He altered checks, changed numbers, tweaked bank codes. But that was risky. Banks eventually caught on. So Frank upgraded. He didn't fake money anymore. He faked identity. One day, he noticed airline pilots walking through airports with automatic respect. No one stopped them. No one questioned them. Doors opened. People listened. So Frank bought a Pan Am uniform. Not a perfect one. Not official. Just close enough. And suddenly, the world rolled out a red carpet. At just 19 years old, Frank Abagnale was walking through airports as a Pan Am pilot. He wasn't flying planes. He didn't know how. But he didn't need to. The uniform did all the work. Hotels gave him free rooms. Airlines gave him free flights. Employees assumed someone else had checked his credentials. This wasn't hacking. This wasn't brilliance. This was social engineering before the term even existed. Frank called it deadheading. He'd claim he was a pilot traveling to his next assignment. Airlines would happily seat him, sometimes even in first class, over 2 million miles, for free, and nobody stopped him. But he didn't stop there. One day, someone asked him a technical question about flying. Frank realized he was pushing his luck, so he switched costumes. This time, he became a doctor. Let that sink in. A teenager with no medical training walked into a hospital and introduced himself as a pediatrician. And they believed him. Why? Because he wore a white coat. Because he spoke confidently. Because he never looked unsure. Hospitals assumed someone else had verified his credentials. Frank made sure to position himself in administrative roles, supervising interns instead of touching patients. He learned just enough medical language to sound legitimate. He studied at night, memorized terms, repeated phrases. And for almost a year, no one realized the doctor was a kid pretending. The scam only ended when the pressure got too real. Lives were on the line. Frank walked away before disaster struck. Then he became a lawyer. Yes, really. He forged a Harvard law transcript, studied for weeks, and passed the Louisiana bar exam on his third try. At 19, he was working in the Attorney General's office, surrounded by real lawyers, arguing real cases, signing real documents. This wasn't just fraud anymore. It was absurd. And yet it worked. Because the system trusted paper more than people. By this point, Frank had cashed over $2.5 million in fraudulent checks. Adjusted for inflation, that's tens of millions today. Banks, corporations, and institutions were bleeding money. Executives didn't want to admit they'd been fooled by a teenager. So many cases quietly disappeared. Losses were written off. Embarrassment buried the truth. But eventually, someone noticed the pattern. The FBI. Agent Carl Hanratty was assigned to track down the mysterious con artist. At first, it felt like chasing a ghost. Frank left no fingerprints, no consistent identity, no pattern that made sense. Every time the FBI got close, Frank was already gone. Different city, different name, different life. Frank wasn't running from the law. He was dancing around it. But here's the thing about cons. Every day is performance. Every conversation is risk. Point one mistake, one slip, one wrong answer, and everything collapses. Years old and completely alone. No home, no real friends, no future, just constant movement and fear. Eventually, the pressure cracked him. In France, Frank made one final mistake. A former girlfriend recognized him. The authorities closed in. He was arrested and extradited. The kid who outsmarted billion-dollar institutions sat alone in a prison cell. The magic was over. Frank was sentenced to 12 years in prison. The story should have ended there. But this is where it gets weird. The FBI realized something incredible. Frank wasn't just a criminal. He was a genius at understanding fraud. Help us catch other scammers. Or rot in prison. Frank chose option one. He began teaching the FBI how fraud actually works. How people exploit trust. How systems fail. How criminals think. And suddenly, the teenager who scammed billionaires became the man helping protect them. Frank Abagnale was released early. He founded a consulting company. Banks hired him. Governments listened. Corporations paid him millions to explain how he once stole from them. The same skills that made him dangerous made him valuable. And that's the uncomfortable lesson of this story. Frank didn't succeed because he was smarter than everyone else. He succeeded because the system was built on shortcuts. On trust without verification. On authority without proof. On appearances instead of reality. The billionaires weren't stupid. They were busy. And busy people don't double-check uniforms. Today, Frank Abagnale lives quietly. No disguises. No fake names. Just a man who understands something most people don't. Scams don't work because criminals are brilliant. They work because systems are lazy. And confidence is the most powerful currency in the world. A 19-year-old proved that. Not with a weapon, not with code, not with violence, but with a suit, a smile, and the courage to pretend. And the scariest part? If he tried the same thing today, it might be even easier.